Well again. So here we are at my second interview, and hopefully the last I do without somebody else to talk to. Today I thought I'd tell you about two very important teachers I had in my youth and what they taught me through their way of living. The two people I'm going to talk about are my Grandma Jones, my mother's mother, whose name was Myrtle Height Jones. Her maiden name was Height. And my grandmother Grandma McCollum, whose name was Opal Green McCollum. Her maiden name was Green. My grandmothers were wonderful women, and surprisingly enough, I don't think this is very common, it might be, they were friends with each other. They liked each other. They were very traditional in the sense that if you saw them on the street, the first word might come to your mind would be grandma, whether they belonged to you or not. They were very much rural women, and they lived their lives with a sort of dignity that I hope I aspire to. So I want to start with Grandma Jones because I spent more time with her in my childhood and youth than I did with many other relatives. From the time I was about 9 until I was 15 or 16, I would spend a month to 6 weeks every summer break with Grandma Jones at her house in Clayton. And she taught me a lot of things. I'll talk more about some of the things she taught me later, probably in other episodes. But I want to focus on the two different ways these women functioned as cooks to give you an idea of what they taught me. Grandma Jones was a very traditional cook. She used simple ingredients and she emphasized fresh ingredients. She liked things to be homemade, and she took pride in what she made. Her technique was impeccable. Her touch was remarkable. So there weren't a lot of spices in her foods. She favored salt and pepper, things like cinnamon in her sweet dishes. She favored butter and lard. Who doesn't? But her technique was absolutely beautiful. She really knew her business as far as methodology. And one of the things she did was she did not prepare toast the way most people do with a regular toaster. She used a toaster oven, and she would sugar and cinnamon the toast before it was toasted so that it got all melty and caramely, and oh my gosh, it was so good. It was so good that I myself have a toaster oven rather than just a toaster for my toast. So her techniques actually were what really set her apart. She knew how things should feel in her hands as a cook. And she absolutely knew how to do everything a cook should know how to do. Both of them actually were more like chefs, because Grandma Jones could go out in the yard, get a chicken, kill it, pluck it, dress it, cut it into pieces, fry it, and serve it all within a couple of hours. She was really good at that, and her food, because it was that fresh out of the garden, out of the yard, was delicious. So the other thing she did, she was very good at breads. My brothers, my oldest brothers, the older boys, always talked about how wonderful her cinnamon rolls were, that they were the best cinnamon rolls. And I agree, she also made the best pickles. Her pickles were so good. And I don't have any of the recipes, which just breaks my heart. But her bread making was astonishing, both quick and yeasted. And one of the things she used in her yeasted breads was uniquely hers. She had her finger, her index finger of her left hand had been broken when she was just a child. And by the time the doctor made it to their farm, it had permanently healed in a curve like that, sort of like a hook. And when she kneaded bread, she didn't knead it on the countertop the way a lot of cooks do. She held it up in the air and spun it round that finger. And when I saw something new, you know, stand mixers that have dough hooks, I'm like, oh, that's why it worked. Grandma had a natural dough hook. But she was really astonishing with that. And so I learned some wonderful techniques from her. I learned to watch her. I learned to understand the value of freshness and homemade from her. And she was absolutely wonderful at saying, okay, you're a kid, but you can stand next to me and I'll let you watch everything I do. I'll let you try it. So she really was a wonderful hands-on teacher. Someday I'll tell you the story of the corn on the cob, but hopefully that'll be during an interview with my brother Brian, who is a supremely experienced substitute teacher, and I think an interview with a substitute teacher would be definitely worthwhile. So this is my shout out to Brian to tell him that I'm coming for him. Now, Grandma McCollum was different. Whereas Grandma Jones was sort of shy and self-effacing and suffering, Grandma McCollum was confident and strong and sophisticated. She had been a teacher. She was actually a teacher when she met Grandpa McCollum, and had not originally thought necessarily she would get married. So she married when she was a little bit older, in her 20s, and which at the time evidently was an old maid. I don't understand the old world some ways. But anyway, she was less indulgent as a grandma, in the sense that Grandma Jones would let me stand next to her while she cooked and, you know, stick my fingers in what she was doing and learn that way. Grandma McCollum, you strictly observed. You did not get between her and her work. She was an observed cook. She didn't use measuring cups and things like that. She knew how things were, how much she needed for certain things. She knew the feel, and that's what she used. And my Aunt Betty used to say that she was trying to learn to cook from Grandma McCollum, but it was hard because she had the dribs and drabs figured out, but the glups were hard. Which, of course, that's the liquid measure. And Grandma McCollum would do it. She would pour directly from whatever bottle she was using to flavor something, or it could be oil, it could be flavoring, it could be anything. And she did not measure. She just cooked like that. She was courageous and strong and knew her business. The other thing, another thing that she absolutely did that Grandma McCollum did not do, she used spices, exotic spices, and she wasn't afraid of them. If she found somebody, I know she met a Lebanese cook at least once in her life, because there were a number of dishes she made that used traditional Lebanese seasoning, and she was not Lebanese. So somehow or another, she found somebody who made something that she really loved, and she used that. So she was not afraid of spices. She had them in her cabinet. She grew them in her yard. She was ready to do it. The other thing she wasn't afraid of was substitution. She lived on a ranch really far from town. So if she wanted to make something and she didn't have all the prescribed ingredients in a recipe, she'd figure out a substitution. And sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. But she knew how to taste and test her dishes, and she wasn't afraid to just go for it and try something. And so she was very inventive as a cook as well. And she also followed a standard that was really hard on us as kids. She didn't believe in snacking. She didn't let you weren't allowed at the ranch to eat between meals. You ate when the food was served. And I think part of what she was operating under was, look, you're going to like it if you're hungry enough. You know, courageous cooks will sometimes make things that don't taste quite right, and people could get fussy. You didn't get fussy at the ranch. You got desperately hungry. And by the time you ate, you were like, oh, this is so good. It's amazing. Which usually it was amazing even if you weren't hungry, but you were hungry at the ranch, and that helped. That always helps the flavor of the food. Hunger helps. Um, you know, both of them were devoted to their families. Both of them were loving wives. Grandma Jones was absolutely attenuated to Grandpa Jones. I got to see them together, although Grandpa died when I was 9. I got to see them together and see how they operated together, and she adored him. She was a totally smitten kitten around him. Now, Grandpa McCollum I never met. He died the year I was born, but I got to see something from Grandma McCollum that I learned, and I hope I carry forward myself, having to do with discussion, something that I didn't realize was rare, but the McCollums did, that I really like. Whereas Grandma Jones knew a million parlor games, and we would play dominoes, and she knew all these little songs. She was, very good at lubricating a party that way. Grandma McCollum could get a party going with just people sitting around the fire and talking. And one of the ways she did that was she was incredibly strict about how we behaved toward each other. And I didn't realize that that was what was controlling things there. But every person, when they spoke at the McCollum house, everybody listened. It didn't matter how little you were. If you had a story you wanted to share, you could share it, and everybody was to listen. No interrupting and no ignoring. So all the grown-ups would talk and all the kids would talk. It was wonderful. And I didn't realize how rare this was until I got into college and started noticing that other people's, my friends' families, did not do that. They would talk over each other. They would interrupt each other. All that stuff. No, not at the ranch. We'd all gather in the living room around that big wood stove and tell stories. And Grandma McCollum had a way of lubricating the stories by starting a story that she liked from someone and then letting them take it over because they told it so well. And so there were stories we loved to hear because of that. I really liked that about her, and I think it's a teacherly thing to do. It's a way to draw people into the group and let them feel a part of it. And it doesn't matter whether you're the biggest and strongest, tallest, oldest, or youngest. When you have the floor, you have the floor. Now, little kids maybe didn't get it for as long, and they certainly weren't as entertaining as the grown-ups. But what a feeling it gave you. That's why I think McCollums are sort of into being McCollums. There's a lot of horrible things come out of being a McCollum, but man, to be a part of that group around the stove, that was pretty rarefied air. Nice to think about. I hope your family gives you some rarefied air today, and I hope to see you again, you gorgeous people.